I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Autoimmune Reset podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist, and expert in autoimmune disease. And today I'm joined by someone whose story and expertise I know so many of you will resonate with, and this is Holly Bertone. Holly is a former FBI Chief of Staff for Counterintelligence who made an extraordinary pivot to the world of health after walking through breast cancer, having an autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's, and realizing that constant sense of achievement was potentially impacting her well-being. She's known as the emotional eating profiler, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, as well as her own story, because Holly brings together this remarkable expertise from her FBI years and actually helping people with emotional eating. And you've been through issues with emotional eating yourself as well, haven't you? So welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. So let's hear a little bit about your story to start with.
VJ, thank you so much for having me. And I just really appreciate this time on this show. And again, I'm Holly Bertone. I help women conquer emotional eating to really achieve a sustainable and healthy weight without the calories and the crazy diets and all of the things that so many people think we have to go through. But before I get into, kind of my story and background, what I want to do is I really want to encourage all of your listeners to scroll down on the podcast app that they're listening to and leave a 5-star rating and review, because that's going to mean so much to me. I left mine. You can see it there. Honestly, there's so many autoimmune podcasts out there and you have a lot to choose from. Yours is the best. It really is the best because of all of the time and effort that you have put into just making it excellent. And I really encourage all of your listeners to pay it forward and to leave a 5-star rating and review for you.
Thank you so much, Holly. I really appreciate that. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you today as well, because I know when I'm working with clients, this emotional eating component comes up time and time again. But first, what I'd really love to hear about is your own story, because that's probably why you do what you do today. And I know you've had your own difficulty with emotional eating. So could you talk us through how you ended up here? And I know you've got your FBI and other experience, which sounds so exciting, to be honest. But I often say about what I do as a job as a nutritionist is that we are detectives. We like spotting patterns. And I know that's something that you love as well. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I actually want to start with saying that I struggled with my weight my entire life. And I would say I struggled with emotional eating my entire life. Obviously, I didn't know what it was back then. And when I say emotional eating, I'm talking about not necessarily to put a label on it, but anytime we're eating because of a big emotion, whether we're stressed or we're bored, we're lonely, we're angry, we're overwhelmed, we're rewarding ourselves, we're eating to give ourselves comfort. So when I talk about emotional eating, it's from that perspective. And there were times in my life I was 40 pounds overweight. There were times in my life when I weighed 110 pounds and I was a competitive mountain bike racer and a triathlete. And the common through line was that I used food for comfort. And I went to the ice cream and the pizza and the French fries. And in 2010, I had back-to-back diagnosis with breast cancer, and I went through the traditional surgery, chemo, radiation. I did not get healthier. And finally, it took the doctors some time to diagnose. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners either have or know, but for those who aren't familiar, it's the autoimmune component of hypothyroidism. And if we were to put two of the biggest side effects on the table, it's weight gain and fatigue. And I struggled with both of them. And as I was going through these back-to-back diagnoses, I was the FBI's chief of staff for counterintelligence. So I had a very high stress job, a high pressure environment. I had a team of individuals. I had people, just the front office, the executives, just constantly wanting everything from me, juggling a high stress career, juggling back to back diagnoses. I was newly married and I had a stepson. He was a little guy when he got married. When we got married, he was 7. So he was still a little guy at the time. I mean, he's 23 now and towers over me. Back then, I was juggling it all, which I think is so common for so many women with autoimmune diseases. Is like we have to do everything for everyone. And for me, and maybe someone listening can relate to that, is two of the biggest symptoms that I felt. It wasn't just the weight gain, but it was the constant fatigue. It was the fatigue of feeling like you could get, a full night's sleep and wake up exhausted. Like this level of fatigue that does not leave your body. And in addition to that, a lot of just pain and joint pain and soreness. So when you feel like crap all day long, your body's craving the sugar and the carbs. And for me, it was, oh, I made it through the day. I have all of these responsibilities. I made it through the day. Yay me. I deserve a treat. I deserve a reward. So I was constantly not just eating because I felt like crap and my body was craving all the sugary, carby foods, but I was also eating to reward myself. And my
Yeah.
weight fluctuated up and down. And fast forward, I ended up resigning from the FBI just when my health got to a place where I couldn't keep up with everything. I realized I'm not Superwoman. I can't do it all. And so we made the decision for me to stay home. I actually became a health coach at that point and was able to be a full-time mom for my stepson, and absolutely never regret 1 second of home for him during that time. What I learned is that when I turned 49, is everything that I learned in my health coaching certifications wasn't working anymore. So I went from being this processed food junkaholic to eating healthy all of the time. And then my weight just shot up by 20 pounds, what felt like overnight. It wasn't overnight, but it felt like overnight. Like I just blinked and all of a sudden. And it wasn't just weight gain. And I know your listeners are going to understand this. I was bloated and puffy and inflamed.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at the pictures, my face is huge. It looks like I put on 50 or 60 pounds instead of 20 pounds. And that's when I realized that what I had learned as a health coach wasn't working. All of the traditional ways that they say, oh, you have to eat healthy and you have to go on the diet, you have to do the calories and get your exercise in. It wasn't working, especially wasn't working with full-blown Hashimoto's. And I was able to put a lot of it, I was able to reduce a lot of those symptoms with eating healthier, but I was still struggling with my weight and struggling with the symptoms. And that's when I
Yeah.
realized, okay, the system has to change. If what I was taught in school isn't working for me, something has to change. There's something else going on. And that's when I put the FBI hat back on. I became that detective again and became that investigator. And I realized that sometimes it's not always a matter of what we're eating, but why we're eating. And looking at it from the perspective of let's swim upstream. I know you talk all the time about getting to the root cause. So we're doing exactly that with emotional eating. Is let's get to the root cause of why I was eating in the first place, to take some of that, what I like to call radical responsibility. And from there, I was actually able to develop a methodology that combines brain science. It's called neuroplasticity, and we can get into that with the tactics that I learned in counterintelligence. Because while the strategy and the system focuses on rewiring your brain, daily life is going to exist. I mean, we're always going to have the pressure and the stress. We're always going to be losing our keys or getting in an argument with our spouse or running late for work or all of the things, holidays and vacation, good stress, right? There's always going to be something that's going to just throw us for a loop. So it wasn't just a brain rewiring perspective. It's how can we combine this with the skills that I learned in FBI counterintelligence, the pattern analysis, the threat analysis, so that we can stay ahead of the threat, so that it doesn't matter what is going on in our life. We're not diving headfirst into the ice cream like I used to do. So not only was I able to lose 20 pounds in my 50s and get back down to, as I call my fighting weight, the weight that I used to be, and help hundreds of women do the same, I was able to actually reverse the symptoms of Hashimoto's. I mean, I'm still on my medicine. I'm still taking my thyroid medicine, but I was able to reverse those symptoms as well. And now I will put a disclaimer out there. I do not poke the bear. I do not poke the bear. I live a very intentional lifestyle because it feels so much better to wake up, to have that energy, to be able to live a full and vibrant life.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible, especially, I think, what your story illustrates is that as we move through life, sometimes we do need to make changes. And I feel like, in my early 40s, I feel the best I've ever felt. But at the same time, I mean, your 40s is a very changeable time in life, and something that's working for me now probably isn't going to work in 5 years' time. So it feels like the way that you've been able to notice patterns is probably key to how you've been able to do this for yourself and help lots of women do the same. So what are those patterns that you're looking for, and how does that help you get to the root of this issue? Because it is so challenging. And I'll just be honest, I like savory food. I like hummus and chips and all that type of thing. That's what I'm going to want to eat a lot of. But I think with a sweet tooth, I find it really challenging for my clients because they know the right thing to do, and they know when they go to a meeting and there's lots of biscuits on the table, really that's not going to be great for them. But in that moment, they're feeling tired, they've got to concentrate, they're in the meeting, they're there on the table, and suddenly they're eating the cookie. So what patterns do people need to look for to help them in those moments in particular?
The beauty of this is that our brain is a pattern predicting machine, and our brain likes comfort, and safety for our brain is doing the same thing over and over again. So when you think about it from that perspective, let's say there's a certain time of day. So for some people, maybe it's 3:00, and at 2:59, they're in the office break room or going to the vending machine to get a Reese's cup, or if they're at home, they're going into the pantry to get their get a granola bar or something like that. So there's a time trigger. For some people, it's a connection trigger. So for example, you get home from work and you have a special time with your spouse that it's like, oh, let's have a glass of wine and let's have some cheese and crackers. And it's your wind down time. Or sometimes it's a environmental. So you just see the food. You're walking by, there's a dish of the little miniature candy bars, and you just grab a couple. I mean, it's physically in front of you and you just grab it. Sometimes it's seasonal, and maybe a certain time of year they have seasonal candies and treats that only come out that time of year. So it's your brain goes into scarcity mode. You don't want to miss it. So you can look at it from that perspective of, okay, I only get this one time a year. Your brain's like, I have to have it now. And then finally, the last one is a lot of women, especially, we go nonstop all day. So the first time we sit down is at night. So 8:00, 9:00 at night. And typically what happens is that we're sitting down, we're watching TV. Oftentimes we're on our phone, or, if we're working, we've got our laptop. and, kind of half doing everything and mindlessly eating the cookies or the chips or whatever is in front of us. One more actually that I thought of is reward is I had a hard day, I deserve to eat the thing. And then another one is peer pressure too. Whether you're at your in-laws' house and they're offering seconds and you don't want it, but you take it because you don't want to, make them feel bad, or you're at dinner and everyone's ordering dessert and you're quote unquote trying to be good, but you also don't want to look like the weirdo not ordering the dessert. So there's a lot of patterns that we can actually look at, but we are predictable. The beauty is we are predictable. So when you think about it, and someone listening can think about it from this perspective of what are those patterns? How does that look like in my life? And what are those situations? So let's say if you're running late and it stresses you out, and then the next thing you know, you're stopping at the drive-through. And this happens every time. You're like, okay, why did this happen? So that's just one way of looking at patterns, but I wanted to be pretty comprehensive in some of the different ones that I see with my clients.
Okay, I think that's really helpful. I remember when I kind of went through this process a while ago, and it was definitely that reward after work, thinking, you've had a long day, just want to go and eat a few things. I've tried to use substitution to help me. So actually, something is like reading a magazine, which I don't actually get to do that often, but that's become my little treat, or having a bath, or you're doing some Pilates. So I've tried to bring in something else which feels still like a reward. Understanding why you're doing something and noticing a pattern and acknowledging it is so powerful in itself. How does somebody take understanding what their pattern is to then being able to make better choices in those instances?
So I have a three-phase process, a 3-step process that I take my students and clients through, and it's called See It, Stop It, Shift It. And when you think about it from the perspective of looking at brain science and looking at the science of neuroplasticity is a big word and hard to say. Yeah. I like to say it's just like potty training a puppy. So if you've ever potty trained a puppy, it's the exact same thing. So the puppy is just going to go potty on the carpet. It's going to go pee-pees on the carpet. You take the puppy out every 2 hours and you put him on the grass and you reward the puppy for going potty on the grass. This is exactly what we're doing with our brain. So it's going to take repetition, and our brain has one path in the woods that it knows. So it's food equals comfort. That's the only path. That's the only path that we have created in our brain. So what we want to do is we want to create a new path in our brain that food is just neutral. We're going to stop that path of food equals comfort. So step 1 is called See It. And that is the awareness. That's exactly what we just talked about, is having that awareness, is noticing those patterns. Because when you notice the patterns, you can create a game plan. And here's where this gets really cool, is that our brain actually has, it's called System 1 and System 2. And it's from a gentleman by the name of Kalaman, and he wrote a book and explained the System 1, System 2. It's Daniel Kahneman's book. And when we look at emotional eating from that perspective, System 1 brain is emotional, automatic. It's the limbic system of the brain. So everything's going to happen automatically. Whereas System 2 is the prefrontal cortex. It's more logical and more strategic. So what we do is we throw willpower, we throw diets, we throw counting calories, which is all System 2. We're like, oh, we just need to be better. We just need to be disciplined. These are all System 2, but what's happening is that we are eating at an emotional level. So what we need to do is address this at the emotional level first, and then add on the System 2 so it can be sustainable. So when you look at it from step 1 is See It. So we're aware of those patterns that we have. Step 2 is Stop It. So let's say we're coming up on this path in the woods, and we don't want our brain to go down the old path. We want our brain to go down the new path. So what we need to do is actually take a few steps back to rewind the tape and say, okay, what is going on that causes this. Again, our brain loves being predictive, and our brain loves the same patterns over and over again. So we are actually going to know what we need to go back to. What happens at that point before we dive into that pint of ice cream? What happens before we open up that bag of cookies? What happens before I grab all the candy out of the coworker's dish? So when we know that, this is stop it. This is what we implement what's called countermeasures in the FBI. Basically, we counter that threat before it happens. These are tactical interventions. So when we can identify what's going on before, then we can create a game plan to stop it at that moment before we actually go through it. Rather than trying when we're in the moment, when all the dopamine kicks in, when our brain is like, give me the food, give it to me now, it's kind of game over at that point. So we want to hit that beforehand. So that step 2 is stop it. And then step 3 is shift it. So see it, stop it, shift it. And step 3 is when we are going to bring back. So we start at the system 1 level, and we address this at that automatic, that emotional perspective. Step 3 is when we go back to system 2. We go back to the logic, the systems, and go back to addressing this with your prefrontal cortex. Because when we can make this effortless and when we can make this sustainable, when it's effortless and sustainable, it can become predictable. And when it becomes predictable, then we know we've got this for good. So instead of coming at this from the perspective of, I need to go on a diet, I need to count the calories, I need to deprive myself, it's let's come at this from the perspective of what's going on in the first place. Let's address it. Let's find out what's happening before then. Let's address that. And then let's come up with our game plan.
Okay, so what in that scenario, when we're in the see stop, all makes perfect sense. So the shift, if somebody was coming home on an evening and you know they're just about to go into the fridge and they stop and take a few breaths, what's the process then with the shift? What would be an example of that?
Yeah, so see it, stop it, shift it. So the shift is when our brain is automatically going down that new path. So instead of, let's say you had a bad day at work, you come home and there's cupcakes on the counter. The old version of you would just dive right into the cupcakes. The new version of you in shift it looks at the cupcakes, goes through this process, understands, okay, why is it that I want the cupcakes? Am I belly hungry or am I brain hungry? And what are those underlying emotions going on behind the need for me to have the cupcakes? So the new version of you in see it, stop it, shift it looks at those cupcakes from more of an investigator perspective and then makes the decision, do I still want the cupcakes, yes or no? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes we still want the cupcakes. And I always like to say the win is the awareness, because when you can actually go through the process, the chances of eating all of the food on the other side of it, a lot less. And what's crazy about the third step in the process, and I hear this all the time from my clients, and I love it because it's so cool, is that they'll come to me and they'll say, Holly, I did everything you said to do. And they're like, I just realized that I'm not, whatever it is, reaching for the chocolate or reaching for the chips or reaching for the cookies. I didn't do it for 3 days. And what happens is that it becomes so automatic that they actually don't even realize for several days that they weren't doing it. And that's how natural this can be. Again, just like potty training a puppy, everyone hears brain science and neuroplasticity. They think, oh, this sounds so rewiring your brain. It sounds so complicated or confusing. It's literally as simple. We are potty training our brains. That's all we are doing. And when you get to shift it, it is so natural. You totally forget that old path in the woods even exists.
I didn't go through this process with you, but when I think back in my own health, I feel like I did this process because I realized I wasn't able to have gluten. I had chronic fatigue, and when I had anything sugary, I just would crash so badly afterwards. That really put me off those types of food. So I did go through this process, but it was understanding at that shift point. It was like, do I want to feel really like tired as in crashing out in an hour's time? Is it worth that? And I'll be honest, sometimes it was, especially if I had nothing to do and I knew, that it didn't matter if my energy crashed. But over time, I think now, when I see a biscuit, I wouldn't even think to eat it. It's almost like not a food anymore, because I think I've, just naturally gone through that process. So sometimes it's knowing what the outcome will be as well, and thinking, is it worth that outcome? And sometimes it will be. And I know through knowing you and listening to you that you focus on nourishment as well, and you have that ethos, and that's where I come from. Like, nutrient dense food is so important and nourishment is important, and I focus more on that rather than restriction. But I think going through this process, you're not restricting anything, you're making the choice, and as long as you're making that informed choice, it can make a big difference. But of course it takes a while to get here, doesn't it? Because it took, I grew up on crisps and fast food and pizza, and that was my diet really when I was a teenager, and it took me a while to get through. I loved sugary sweets. I just eat a whole packet of like jellies, and I loved that food. So it takes a while to get to this point, 25 years later. And I know you've spoken about intuitive eating as well, but yeah, I can see how this can really be effective over time. But it's true, isn't it? It's not going to be, this doesn't happen overnight, does it?
It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, from an expectation perspective, typically my clients see initial results in about 10 days. So, and it really averages that 7 to 10 days where they, for the very first time, they say, I put the fork down automatically. Now, it doesn't happen 100% of the time after that. So the quick win happens pretty quickly. But in order to make this a habit, in order to make this sustainable, it does take time. And I'm so glad you brought up about the nourishment, because that, I think, is a part of what so many, I'm just influencers and coaches in our space, just say, oh, just eat all the junk food that you want, and as long as you're in a calorie deficit. And I don't believe in that. I believe that we should eat food that nourishes our bodies. And, that's on the other side of this as well, is I help to teach these ladies that you can listen to your body. Here's how to do it. Because we have so much noise coming at us from the news and social media and our friends and what everyone says, and, eat this and don't eat that and don't eat that and don't eat this. And there's so much conflicting information. It's like, how do you know what's best for me? So when we go through this process, it also gives them an opportunity to slow down, to be quiet, to really start to listen to their bodies and really start to understand what is best for me. And I know you had shared at one point your transition from, I think we or vegetarian or vegan or something, to eating more meat and more red meat. And I was like that. I mean, I probably was 30, 40 years of my life that I did not eat red meat. And at the time, I thought that was the healthiest for me. And I made some of those changes. And now I am eating a lot more meat, a lot more red meat, and am feeling that in my body. This may or may not be the end all be all forever, but this is what helps me to feel good now. And I really want everyone listening to understand that you can learn to trust your body. You can learn to know what is going to give you nourishment. I mean, right away, a lot of foods we're going to know, is this fueling me or is this draining me? Do I feel tired? Do I get a headache? Do I get a migraine? Is my nose running? Am I coughing? I mean, do I get a little rash or something? I mean, there's so many different ways our body speaks to us, especially from an autoimmune perspective, that we can start to listen to our bodies and to make those decisions, to have that discernment and to be empowered as to what is best for us.
I find some clients don't want to write down every food or symptom that they're having, but just observing. If you eat a food and suddenly your skin feels itchy, or like me, if you're eating a lot of sugar and you crash afterwards, I mean, this is giving you the signs that potentially that food isn't the right thing for you. And I think you mentioned that you have an allergy to pineapple. Is that right? So it's not always, you might think that a food is healthy, but it might not be right for you. And I know that there's certain foods that when I eat them, they are typically, a healthy food, but they're just not right for my body. Even with things like gluten, I don't eat gluten because I can see the effect it has. I mean, mainly on my nervous system and my anxiety. It causes panic attacks for me. But I can see that. So for me, it's just a very easy, I'm not going to eat that, and I've got loads of other things that I like to eat instead of that. But for the next person, even though we've probably heard loads about gluten, there's a lot of clients of mine that do eat gluten and they're absolutely fine with it. So it's just knowing what's right for you, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, well, I have loved this conversation. I think people are going to find so many practical tips from it and going through that process. But of course, I'm sure they're going to want to learn more about what you do. So where can everybody find you?
Yeah, so Vijay, I want to do something really special for your audience since obviously still listening to the end of this episode. And I've got 2 gifts for your listeners. But before I dive in, I want to explain who this is for. It's for someone if they feel like they're high achieving, they're going after all the things and achieving success, but not in control around food. So experiencing some of the things that we talked about today. They're stress eating and snacking and have all the food noise in the crate. So what this is, it's called the Emotional Eating Tactical Blueprint. And it's got 2 things. And the first is a psychological profile where you're going to uncover your number 1 stress eating trigger to actually understand what's driving this trigger. So we talked about the patterns. This is going to help you to get there. And the second thing is something that is exclusively for my clients, and I'm going to give it away totally free. It's called the Crime Scene Files Emotional Eating. So this is the tools to help you intercept those triggers and behaviors. So you're going to be able to look at the patterns, and then you're going to get the tools to intercept. Both of these are designed from an FBI's perspective. So if you're listening and you're geeked out with the true crime podcast or the CSI shows, you are going to love this gift. So if you want it, again, it's the Emotional Eating Tactical Blueprint, totally free as my thanks for listening. You can go to my Instagram at holly.bertone, and it's Bertone, holly.bertone, and DM me the word blueprint, and I will send it over.
Thanks so much, Holly, and thank you for providing that to my audience. It will all the information will be in the show notes. So thanks again for being here.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you everybody for listening into this conversation with Holly. I hope you have some takeaways from the show today. I'm sure you do. If you know anybody else that would find this subject matter interesting, feel free to share this episode with them. You can also come over to my Instagram account at the Autoimmunity Nutritionist and ask any questions over there, or join my free group, the Autoimmune Forum. If not, have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time, and remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.